place. Purport. We must certainly know that on the absolute plane, Krishna Kata and Krishna are one and the same. The Lord is the absolute truth, and therefore his name, form, quality, etc., which are all understood to be Krishna Kata, are non-different from him. Bhagavad Gita, being spoken by the Lord, is as good as the Lord himself. When a sincere devotee reads Bhagavad Gita, this is as good as seeing the Lord face to face in his personal presence. But this is not so for the mundane wrangler. All the potencies of the Lord are there when one reads Bhagavad Gita, provided it is read in the way recommended in the Gita by the Lord himself. One cannot foolishly manufacture an interpretation of Bhagavad Gita and still bring about transcendental benefit. Anyone who tries to squeeze some artificial meaning or interpretation from Bhagavad Gita for an ulterior motive is not Shraddhadhana Pumsa, one engaged anxiously in bona fide hearing of Krishna Katha. Such a person cannot derive any benefit from reading Bhagavad Gita, however great a scholar he may be in the estimation of a layman. The Shraddhadhana or faithful devotee can actually derive all the benefits of Bhagavad Gita because by the omnipotency of the Lord, he achieves the transcendental bliss which vanquishes attachment and nullifies all concomitant material miseries. Only the devotee by his factual experience can understand the import of this verse spoken by Vidura. The pure devotee of the Lord enjoys life by constantly remembering the lotus feet of the Lord by hearing Krishna Katha. For such a devotee there is no such thing as material existence, and the much advertised bliss of Brahmananda is like a fig for the devotee who is in the midst of the transcendental ocean of bliss. Read the verse again. Sashradadhanasya vivadhamana viraktimanyatra karoti pumsaha hare padanu smriti nivritasya samastutukapyayama shudhate. For one who is anxious to engage constantly in hearing such topics, Krishna Katha gradually increases his indifference towards all other things. Such constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna by the devotee who has achieved transcendental bliss vanquishes all his miseries without delay. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So this is a wonderful verse to give class on. Vidura is speaking to Maitreya, right, in this chapter, and he's explaining the power and the benefits of speaking about Lord Krishna. So this is a lovely topic. Devotees like to hear the glories of Krishna Katha, the glories of Krishna, and here we're hearing the power, the benefits that can be derived just by hearing about Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada explains so nicely in the purport how if you just read Bhagavad Gita, so you could say it's the ABCs of spiritual life. We're reading Bhagavatam every day, devotees are reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, other books. But if you just read Bhagavad Gita, all the benefits that can be achieved by associating with Krishna directly are there if you're reading Bhagavad Gita. It's the same as associating with Krishna directly. Such a powerful thing. Even just an ABC text in our liturgy bestows all the benefits that one can achieve by associating with Krishna directly. So we know that Krishna is non-different than anything associated with him. Nama Chintamani Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddho Nitya Mukto Binatwan Nama Namanaho. So this is describing the glories of the holy name, that is the origin of all transcendental rasa. It's purely transcendental and it's non-different than Krishna. Binatwan Nama Namanaho. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bhumirapo nalo vayu kammano buddhirevacha ahankaramiti me bina prakrita ashtada. So he says, bina prakrita ashtada. So these material energies are different than me. But here he's saying, abhinatva namino. He's saying the holy name is not different than me. Naminoho means the name and the possessor of the name. So the person who possesses that name is non-different than the holy name. He's exactly the same as the holy name. And not only is Krishna non-different than his holy name, but Krishna is non-different than topics describing him. So one devotee was talking to me the other day and saying that Srila Prabhupada said that about the speed of the mind, how the mind is so fast. If you think of the moon, then immediately the mind is there. You think of anything, you think of Africa or any place, Watford, whatever it may be, the mind immediately goes there. The body, it takes a long time to get there, but the mind is immediately there. And he was asking me, but the mind isn't actually there, is it? And we were discussing. I was saying, no, the mind isn't there, but it's a subtle aspect of it. You know, it's contemplating that, it's absorbed in that. It may not be there, but it's aware of that existence, and it can conceive of that. And I was saying to him, but if you think of Krishna, if you think of Krishna's pastimes, or if you think of Lord Ram, and this devotee, it was Krishna Nam Prabhu, our beloved temple commander, he said he used to live in Mayapur. So when he thinks of Mayapur, we were saying that it's non-different than Mayapur, which is an incredible thing, right? If you just think of Krishna, you're actually with Krishna. Wherever you are, whether you're on the tube, whether you're at work, whatever situation you're in, even if somebody's talking to you, you can respond, you can talk, but if you think of Krishna, then you're with Krishna and you're not contaminated. So this is very, very powerful. It's described that many of us are grihastas, we have our daily life, so many things we have to do, but it's described just like a unfaithful woman. She may have a paramour, she may have a lover, but she's at home with her husband and her children doing her daily duties. But she's not thinking of cooking breakfast, she's just thinking of her lover. So devotees, they may have that laptop doing their IT work, or maybe doing whatever they need to be doing, but they can do that, and at the same time they can be thinking of Krishna and absorbed in Krishna. And because Krishna is non-different even than the thought of him, then they are factually associating with Krishna in person. There's one example given in the Nectar of Devotion of this devotee who was performing this manasa seva of cooking sweet rice for his deities, right? Everybody knows the picture in Nectar of Devotion. So he's absorbed in this service that he's doing, and then at one point he goes to check the sweet rice to see if the sweet rice is ready or not, and he puts his finger in the sweet rice and the sweet rice is still hot. He burns his finger, and actually he burns his finger. So it's non-different. Scientists may have a hard time understanding this, but they have a hard time understanding anything, so that's not a surprise. This is an extremely wobbly microphone stand. But yeah, just as that example is given in Nectar of Devotion, if one is actually absorbed in Krishna, then Krishna is there. But Srila Prabhupada says in the purport here that all the potencies of the Lord are there when one reads Bhagavad Gita, provided it is read in the way recommended in the Gita by the Lord himself. One cannot foolishly manufacture an interpretation of Bhagavad Gita and still bring about transcendental benefit. So the Bhagavad Gita is there, and the purity of the Bhagavad Gita is there. And if one hears it as it is, and recites it as it is, remembers it as it is, then Krishna is present. But if one wants to adulterate that, if one wants to use it for a particular purpose, then the potency of the Bhagavad Gita is minimized and it becomes covered. Just like everything is Krishna's potency, everything is Krishna's energy, but it's covered by our consciousness. We don't see that it is Krishna's potency, we see that something is mundane. So the only way to really connect with the Bhagavad Gita, understand the Bhagavad Gita, and derive all the benefits of the Bhagavad Gita is to accept it as it is. And what does that mean, to accept it as it is? To accept Krishna and to accept Bhagavad Gita? That means only by devotion can we be connected to Krishna, not by any other way. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tatvataha tatvato, how does it go? Vishate tadanantaram. I put it down because I knew I'd forget it. Go on, tell me, David. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tatvataha tato mam tatvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. Yeah. So it's only by devotional service that one can approach Krishna and can understand Krishna in full. There's no other way. Krishna cannot be conquered by anything other than devotion. He can be conquered by devotion, but he can't be conquered by anything else. He's a personality. It's not a process. It's not like the Olympics where if you take some steroids then you'll win the competition, or if you're the most powerful, or if you're the most disciplined. For Krishna, he doesn't care. You may be intelligent, you may be renounced, you may be strong, you may be beautiful, whatever opulences you may have. For Krishna, it's immaterial. Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhaktya prayachati. He just wants the bhakti. Krishna just wants the devotion. I think I mentioned in the last class, Duryodhana created this huge feast for Krishna. Krishna wasn't interested. Vidura was offering Krishna banana peels. Krishna was relishing it so much. Krishna wants the love. Krishna wants the devotion. Just like a mother, she has a child, then she doesn't need anything from the child. But if the child gives her something, I remember once, me and my mum went to some second-hand car boot sale type of thing in Suffolk, and there were these Superman books. I thought they were really cool, so I bought some and I gave them to my mum. And she was so touched, and she was so happy, oh, you gave me these Superman books, which was interesting for me, not interesting for her, but she was touched and she appreciated it. For her, it was immaterial what I was offering, a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, doesn't matter. But because I thought of her and because I wanted to offer something to her, then she appreciated that and it touched her heart. So Krishna wants our love, and he doesn't want anything else. Of course, that love may manifest in different ways. It may manifest in terms of our renunciation from material things. It may manifest in our determination. It may manifest in our humility. But the active principle of all of those things is our devotion to Krishna. Like we were saying before in another class, that the only thing that powers a yogi's advancement is the amount of bhakti that they have in their practice. So the jnana and the vairagya, this is insignificant. To the degree that they have bhakti, to that degree they'll be successful. So if one has devotion, then Krishna will be attracted. If one has devotion and accepts things as they are, then one can understand the Bhagavad Gita. And if one doesn't, if one has a misconception about these things, then they will be covered and they will be misunderstood. Just as when Krishna was on the planet 5,000 years ago, can you imagine Krishna was walking around, like we read the news, right? What's his name in Israel? Netanyahu. I've never said his name before. The president, Donald Trump. These are the mundane personalities on the planet doing this and that. Imagine Krishna was on the planet. It's the news, Krishna leaves Vrindavan. Krishna goes to Dwarka. Krishna kills Kaliya in the Daily Mirror, in the sun. Krishna's on the planet, it's happening. He's living. But who could understand who he was? Nobody. Nobody could understand who Krishna was. Very few people. Just a handful of people. So Krishna becomes covered to those people who don't understand him purely. We understand when Krishna went into the wrestling arena in Mathura, then how did they see him? The young women saw him as the most beautiful young boy. The yogis saw him as the Paramatma. The Brajbasis saw him as their I was going to say homeboy, but their beloved member of their village, their most beloved one. So it all depends upon our consciousness. Just like there's instances, Srila Prabhupada mentions, of temples that are dilapidated and not maintained properly. What do they use the Shalagram Shila for? Sorry? Cracking nuts, right? Can you imagine? Using Krishna to crack a nut. So it depends upon our consciousness. It's not just a name. You may have it written down, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Is it a name? It is a name, but it's also Krishna. Nama Chintamani Krishnas. All the potencies of God are within that name. It may be very difficult for people to understand, right? The Hare Krishnas, singing and dancing. They may even say the holy name, Hare Krishna, Hari Hari, all right, Hari. They don't understand, they're associating with Krishna. Everything is there. My spiritual master was saying recently, just like Srimad Bhagavatam is not a book. We have it here, it's not a book. It's not just some words, you put it on a bookshelf, you have so many other books on the bookshelf. You may go to some bookshop and they have Srimad Bhagavatam on the shelf. I want to buy a book. Yeah, you can buy Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not a book. It's prema bhakti in the written form. Prema bhakti manifested as letters. That's actually what it is. So that's the power of Bhagavad Gita, and any descriptions of Krishna and Krishna's names. Going back to another point in the verse, it says here that such constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna by the devotee who has achieved transcendental bliss vanquishes all his miseries without delay. So how is it that it vanquishes our miseries? Can somebody say, why does Krishna Katha vanquish our miseries? Yes? Yep, takes us to another place. Not of this world, yep. Any other suggestions? Come on, at least one. Any suggestions? How does that vanquish our miseries? We get what? We get to know the root cause of the miseries. We're dealing with the root cause of our miseries. Say that again? Because we get to know the root cause of the miseries, we can work upon them, and then the miseries can be vanquished. Yep, we're working on the root cause of our miseries, yes? We get a higher taste, yeah. Param Drishva Nivartate. So there's very nice answers, thank you. Bhagavatam also gives us some answers. Bhakti yogena manasi samyak pranihati male apashad purusham purna maya chatada pashrayam. Probably some devotees know these verses from the first canto. It's describing about Vyasadeva composing Srimad Bhagavatam. How he sat down in meditation and he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He linked his mind in devotional service. Bhakti yogena manasi samyak pranihati male apashat purusham purna maya chatada pashrayam. He saw Krishna and he saw Maya. And then in the next verse it says, Yaya samohito jiva atmanam trigunatmikam paropi manutena tam tatkritam cha vipadyate. So describing Maya, it says, due to this external energy, the living entity thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions to material miseries. So Bhagavatam is so powerful, isn't it? It's so profound. We think we're in this world, I'm doing my things, but actually you have nothing to do with this material body. Absolutely nothing. Bhagavatam says there's no factual connection between the soul and the material body. It's just a misconception. It's just a dream that we think that we're this body. So when we misidentify with this material body, then we undergo the reactions to material miseries. But if one is not misidentifying with this body, if one is understanding that one is a spirit soul, then there's no miseries. It's described that this is advanced and very theoretical for me, but it's our philosophy, that an advanced devotee, they're chanting the holy name, they're fully absorbed in the holy name, and when they're chanting the holy name, then they're remembering Krishna, Krishna's qualities, and Krishna's Leela. They're remembering Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. And when they're remembering Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, when this devotee is very advanced, then they also see themselves taking part in those pastimes and serving Krishna. So they're not identifying with their material body. They're absorbed in transcendental bliss. They're absorbed in ecstasy, unlimited ecstasy, because they know who they are. They realize who they are. So our miseries, just as our connection to this material body is illusory, so are the material miseries as well. We're not this body. I gave the example before of this man who came out of his house, and there'd been a big storm, and a tree had fallen and smashed his car. So when he came out and saw that his car had been destroyed, he had a heart attack and died on the spot. So that car had nothing to do with him. But because he was so attached to it, when it became damaged, he died. So it's the same with us. We're so attached to this material body, something happens to it, then because we're involved in it, then it causes us so much suffering as well. But if we take the correct medicine of Krishna Katha, which gradually wakes us up, just as the sun gradually rises in the morning, right? We're immersed in darkness, then the sun rises, gradually it gets lighter and lighter. You can see a little bit more, maybe a little bit foggy, then it's clearer, and then the sun is up and you can see everything. So just as when we practice devotional service, we gradually become freed from our ignorance, like we get up in the morning. I experience this a lot. You get up in the morning and you're like a zombie, totally groggy, in a bad mood, thinking about this and that, and then you go brush your teeth, feel a little bit better, you take your clothes off, put a gumshoe on, get in the bath, you feel a little bit better, then you have a shower, you're slightly better mood, cold shower, and then you're like awake, and then you can carry on with the day. So similarly in our Krishna consciousness, we come to Krishna consciousness and we're like, lusty, depressed, attached, angry, confused, argumentative, and gradually these things, hopefully, if we're practicing nicely, become purified, gradually become purified. We develop qualities in the mode of goodness, and then ultimately we come to that platform where there are no misconceptions. I'm not this material body. I have nothing to do with this material body. I'm not going to support England in Euro 2024. I'm not English, I'm not American, I'm not Indian, I'm Krishna's little servant. And as we advance in Krishna consciousness, it will become clearer and clearer what kind of servant we are. So one time I was in Hungary, in the Pujari department, and my spiritual master came in, and he said to me just a few words, but it really stuck with me all these years. It must have been 10 years ago or so. He said, we were behind the altar, so in the preparatory area, and he touched the wall leading to the altar. He said, this is reality. He said, everything else is illusion. So if we can imbibe that, then we can actually become free of our material miseries. There's one nice pastime that illustrates the power of Krishna Katha, which I'll narrate before the assembled Vaishnavas with your permission. This is from Bhagavatam Mahatmya, the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's talking about a few interesting personalities, and one of them was Atmadev. So Atmadev lived on the bank of river Tungabhadra, and he was a very nice person, he was a nice devotee, but he was married to one lady who was extremely impious. Her name was Dundali. So she was always criticizing other people, making trouble for other people. But Atmadev, he really wanted to have a son. So he was really wanting to have a son, and they were trying, but it wasn't happening. And he didn't know what to do. So one day he was out going for a walk in the jungle, and he came across a sadhu in meditation. So when this sadhu saw Atmadev, he saw that he was very distressed, and he asked him, what is the matter and what's the problem? So he said, well, I want to have a son, but it's not happening. And the sadhu said to him that actually, from looking at him, he could see that you're destined not to have a son for 7 births. So Atmadev was very upset and very depressed by this. And he said, well, is there anything you can do to help me? And the sadhu says, yeah, I can, if you like. So the sadhu, by the power of this sadhu's spiritual potency, he picked a fruit from the tree and he gave it to Atmadev. He said, if you go and give this to your wife and she eats it, then she'll give birth to a child for you. This is the power of sadhus, although that was destined for Atmadev by this sage's spiritual potency, then he could go beyond that. Mahajano yena gata sapanta. The great devotees can do such things. So when he gave him this fruit, Atmadev was very happy, and he went back to his household. He gave it to his wife Dundali and said, "You please eat this fruit and we'll have a child." And Dundali, she was very selfish. She didn't want to go through the pain of childbirth. So she said, "Atmadev, you go on pilgrimage for a little while and I'll eat this fruit and then we'll have our child." So Dundali was very happy to go on pilgrimage. He was a nice devotee. So he went, and when she did that, then she gave that fruit to a cow. She just threw it into the cow shed. And also her sister, she was actually pregnant at that time, so she organized with her sister that when you give birth, can you give me your child, and I'll say to Atmadev that it was my child. And she said okay, she agreed to that. So that fruit was eaten by a cow, and a child was born of that cow. A human child was born of that cow, but it had cow's ears. Cow's ears, it said, are destined to hear only good things. So a child was born to Dundali's sister, who was called, Atmadev named the children. He called that one Dundukari, and he called the other one, do we know? Gokana. He called the other one Gokana. So Go means cow, Kana means ears, cow ears. So he had these two children, but Dundukari was just like his wife, understandably, because he'd been born from her sister. And he was very evil, he was very impious, he was very badly behaved. And Gokana was just the opposite. Gokana was a wonderful devotee. At one point, Dundukari, he actually kicked Atmadev out of his house. Atmadev had to leave the house. He was kicked out by his own son. So he left the house and he went to the forest where Gokana was there. Gokana was constantly absorbed in reciting the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he went to his son and he said, "What should I do? Dundukari is abusing me, he's violent, he's kicked me out of his house." And Gokana said, "There's only one thing to do. You should give up this contaminated situation, this family life. You're expecting this child to give you so much happiness, but he's giving you so much suffering. Just leave and go to the forest." And actually, that's what the sage had said to Atmadev earlier in the forest. He said, "Don't worry about having a child." He said, "Just go to the forest, renounce everything. Jai Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Ki Jai. Serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in that way you'll be happy." But Atmadev wasn't ready to accept it at that time. But at this point he could understand. He accepted what Gokana said, and he immediately left for the forest and surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Dundukari continued with his nefarious activities. He would bring home prostitutes to his house and enjoy with them, and they would drink alcohol. But at one point, because these ladies were so impious, one of them actually killed Dundukari. So when Dundukari died, then he attained not another birth, but a form of a ghost. And once when Gokana was reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, then he saw this ghost of Dundukari, and he realized it was his brother. He spoke to him, and he wanted to help him, but he didn't know exactly what to do. So he spoke to different personalities. They weren't sure, and they said, "Okay, you should approach Suryadev, and you should pray to Suryadev." So he prayed to Suryadev, at least according to this version. And Suryadev said to him, "You should recite the whole Srimad Bhagavatam over 7 days. And if you recite Srimad Bhagavatam, then that will benefit your brother and he will achieve liberation." So Gokana organized this Bhagavat Saptaha. He placed the ghost of Dundukari in a bamboo rod that had 7 notches. And after each day's recitation of Bhagavatam, one of the notches of the bamboo would explode, signifying that Dundukari was advancing in devotional service. So each day one of these knots would explode, and after the 7th day, when they'd recited the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole bamboo rod exploded, and a flower airplane came down from Vaikuntha. Dundukari ascended the airplane with the Vaikuntha Dutas, and he went back to the spiritual world. So he attained all perfection by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. But Gokana and the rest of the village who had come to listened to the Bhagavatam, they didn't achieve perfection, and they couldn't understand why. So they asked the Vaikuntha-dutas, why is it that you came, you saved Undukadi, he's gone back to the spiritual world, my sinful brother, but we're still here? And the Vaikuntha-dutas said, it's very simple. Dundukadi was very focused, he was very attentive, he relished every drop of Srimad Bhagavatam, and he appreciated it. So he achieved the full benefit of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. He said, you and the other attendees here, you were listening to some degree, but you weren't fully absorbed. So if you want to get the whole benefit of Bhagavatam, if you want to get the whole benefit of Krishna Katha, then we have to be conscious, at least we have to be attentive. So Gokana and the villagers, they did the Bhagavat Saptaha again for 7 days, this time very seriously, very attentively. And then after those 7 days, then the Vaikuntha-dutas came back and they took Gokana and the whole of the village back to Godhead as well. So this is the power of Srimad Bhagavatam, if we hear it attentively. These are the glories of Krishna Katha. And the glories of Krishna Katha are unlimited. The benefits are unlimited. Tava katamritam tapta jivanam kavibiriditam kalmashapaham Shravana Mangalam Srimaratatam Bodhi Grinantiye Bodhidharjanaha. Even Radha and Krishna can't understand all the benefits of Krishna Katha. This is a very sweet, another pastime that happened with Radha and Krishna, that there's such a thing as Purvarag. Purvarag means you fall in love with somebody, but you haven't met that person. So at one point, Srimati Radharani, she thought that she'd fallen in love with 3 different persons. I don't know if I remember all of it. That she'd heard Krishna playing the flute. She'd heard of Krishna's glories in Vrindavan. She didn't know his name. And then there was another one as well. So she thought she'd actually fallen in love with 3 different personalities. Now she's supposed to be a chaste housewife in the Vedic culture, so she was very distressed. And she told Lalita and Vishaka, and they were laughing and said, no, it's just one person. It's the same person that you've fallen in love with. So before Radha and Krishna met, then they'd actually seen one another from afar, but they'd never spoken to each other. But Radharani had fallen in love with Krishna to such an extent that she could think of nothing else. And she was very distressed because she wasn't with Krishna. She didn't know how she could meet Krishna. It was beyond the realms of their culture that she could have any interaction with him. She was already married to Abhimanyu. So she was just in total distress. And Vishaka was speaking to Radharani. She was saying, well, you need to do something because you're just withering away here. You're just dying in separation from Krishna. So you need to do something. You need to initiate this relationship. So that's not really the Vedic system that the lady makes the first move. But in this situation, then nothing could be done. So Vishaka said to Srimati Radharani, then, why don't you write Krishna a letter? You write Krishna a letter, and we'll take it to him, and then he will at least understand how you feel. And that will be a good first step. So Radharani was very shy. There's one name of Radharani, Lajita Gaurangi, means she's very shy. So she didn't want to do this. She was sitting there. She actually wrote this letter on a rose petal, and they used rose ink that they got from the rose to write it. So she was going to write this letter, but she was just sitting there thinking, how can I write this letter to Krishna? I'm so shy. And but then she thought, no, I have to, otherwise how am I going to gain his association? How will he know how I feel about him? So she started to write this letter. And how do you start a letter? Then you start with the person's name. So she just wrote Krish. She wrote Krish, and at that point she just became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. Krish means the maintainer of everything. So she was thinking and feeling at that time that Krishna, you're everything for me. Anything that I see, it just reminds me of you. There's nothing else that I want other than you. She was thinking so many things about Krishna, how she loves Krishna so much, how she can't live without Krishna. And so all she ended up writing was just Krish, and she couldn't write anymore. So Vishaka came over, Radharani was still absorbed, and she said, I think you should stop there. She said, your letter is too long, and we need to take it to Krishna, so you just stop. So she took this letter, and she sent some gopis to go and take that letter to Krishna. Krishna at that time was resting, but Madhu Mangal was there. And although we hear about Madhu Mangal as being, a funny Brahmin boy and eating lots of ladus, he's actually Krishna's, Leela Guru. No, Kali Guru. He's Krishna's Kali Guru. So he's very aware of Krishna's pastimes, and he's aware of what happens with Krishna and the gopis as well. So they said, we need to give this letter to Krishna. And Madhu Mangal said, that's fine, you can give it to me, I'll give it to Krishna. And the gopis said, no. He said, we don't trust you. We need to give this to Krishna directly. And Madhu Mangal says, you don't trust me? I'm a brahmana. I'm totally trustworthy. Shamodama tapasho cham kshanti rajavamevacha. You can trust me. I have all the Brahminical qualities. And they said, no, we don't trust you. We're not going to give it to you. So they were arguing with Madhu Mangal. And while they were arguing with Madhu Mangal, this woke Krishna up. So Krishna woke up and he said, what's happening here? And the gopi said, we have this letter for you, but we need to give it to you directly. And Krishna said, it's okay, give it to Madhu Mangal, he'll read it to me now. And they said, okay, they could understand, okay, Krishna's going to listen to it. So Madhu Mangal opened the letter and he read it to Krishna. And just as he was saying Krishna, and Krishna could understand everything that Radha was feeling. He could understand that he was everything for her. She couldn't live without him. That if she couldn't meet with him, then there was no point in her living anymore. And Krishna was very happy. Krishna was very touched because he was also absorbed in thoughts of Radha. And so he said to Madhu Mangal, okay, we should also write a letter back to Radharani to appease her. So they also wrote a letter on rose petals with rose ink. Krishna said to Madhu Mangal, okay, I'm going to write this letter now. So he wrote Ra. He didn't even write 3 letters, he only wrote 2 letters, Ra. And as he was writing this, he was thinking that, Radharani, you're the only one that I love. There's nobody else that I love. My mother is worried about me that I can't eat properly, I can't sleep at night. The gopas are massaging my feet and fanning me, but I can't sleep, and anxiety that I'm thinking about you and that I can't meet you. And you're the only one that I love. There's nobody else that I reciprocate everybody else's love. I do love others as well, but the love for you that I experience can't be compared to the love that I feel for anybody else, so I can't live without you. So this letter was sent to Radharani, and she felt that union, that connection with Krishna, and their relationship developed from there. But we can see this is the power of the holy names, right? We're chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day. Radha and Krishna, they're just saying one syllable from the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and it's absorbing them with so much ecstasy. So much rasa is there, so much love is there, so much depth is there. We can't experience the holy name to the same degree that Radha and Krishna experience it, obviously, or to the degree that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu experiences it. But we should understand that the same thing, Golokera Premadana Harinam Sankirtan, the same thing that we're chanting, they're also chanting in the spiritual world. They also do kirtan in the spiritual world. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also doing kirtan, chanting the same Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also reciting the same Srimad Bhagavatam, right? He would read it with his associates, and he would listen to a pastime, like the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj. He would say, read it again. Hear the whole pastime, read it again. They would just be absorbed in Srimad Bhagavatam. So can you imagine how elevated these things are? It's being given to us. We give it out on the street, right? Give me £5. I'll give you Srimad Bhagavatam. Standing on Watford High Street. Here, take a Srimad Bhagavatam. Just give a donation. Just give anything you can. But this same Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna. It's recited in the spiritual world. I was going to mention it. We were having breakfast yesterday, and we were talking about devotees falling asleep in Srimad Bhagavatam class. So that doesn't only happen in Bhaktivedanta Mana. I did notice it today also to some degree. There's one pastime in the spiritual world how once Purnamasi was giving Srimad Bhagavatam class to the gopis, and the gopis were falling asleep as Purnamasi was giving Bhagavatam class. And Purnamasi said, "Hey, what are you doing? You're sleeping. Why are you sleeping in Bhagavatam class?" And the gopis said, "We're so tired. Been dancing all night in the forest with Krishna. We just came back, had a shower, and now we're up again." So Purnamasi said, "Okay, I understand. It's due to your service to Krishna." So they have an excuse. We may or may not have an excuse. But the same thing that we're chanting, the same thing that we're reading, is what they're relishing in the spiritual world as well. Radha and Krishna are experiencing so much ecstasy from their own holy names. How fortunate we are to be given this gift. Just as that sadhu in Vrindavan, he went to Sanatan Goswami to acquire the Chintamani gem. Sanatan Goswami said, "Don't worry about this, give it up. I kept it in the garbage. You don't need it. I'll give you the most valuable thing in the three worlds." The sadhu said, "Okay." He threw it away, and Sanatan Goswami initiated him into the chanting of the holy names. So this is the most valuable thing that there is. This is the greatest gift that can be given to anybody. You all are also Bodhida, the most merciful, because you're going out giving this holy name to others, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, bringing people to Bhaktivedanta Manadam. So these are some small comments on the glories of Krishna Katha. There's a lot more I could have said, but I speak too slow, so I couldn't fit so much in. Thank you for your attention. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Does anybody have any questions or comments or corrections? Yes, Prabhu. Is there a mic for him?
Okay, I was looking at the chapter 15 in Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga of the Supreme Person, which is a wonderful chapter actually. And there was once a person who I met in London. He said, "You're murderers. Your Krishna's a murderer." He completely misunderstood. And I thought, hold on a sec. He's angry. He can't be reasoned with. And you can't tell him about Krishna and how he's supremely merciful and kind to everyone. He's the God of love, actually. But then it brings me to this chapter 15, which it says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "There is an imperishable banyan tree, which has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. But one who knows this tree," he says, "is the knower of the Vedas." We have to know who's the knower of the Vedas. So it says, the branches and twigs, they go up and down. We're saying that the Vedas are everything. They come from Krishna. And then it says, but also they have other twigs, which are kamakanda, people where they want something from the Vedas. He gives it to them. And then he says, the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends or where it begins, where its foundation is. But with the determination one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with a weapon of detachment. Thereafter, we must seek that place from which we come. One never returns, and there surrender to that supreme personality of Godhead, to whom everything has begun, and from whom everything has extended since time memorial. So it's ignorance of that is the weapon. It's destroyed with a weapon of detachment.
Yeah.
And everybody's suffering in this world. We know it. But we've got to go to that place from where everything has extended since time immemorial, and become free from this false prestige, false association, and understand the eternal, who is done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if anybody else has any comments or questions as well. Yes, Srinivas Prabhu? Somebody hand him the mic.
You mentioned in your class about this person who had an accident. He died in an accident, or he died after the car was gone, then he was okay, then he died after that?
No, he wasn't involved in the accident at all. It was just by seeing that he wasn't in the car, he was standing outside his house. His car was across the street, and the car was already destroyed when he came out. He just had a heart attack because his car was damaged. He wasn't in the car. He wasn't there when the accident happened. Purely due to his attachment to his car, he died.
There's a story with Sachinandan Swami's grandfather or something. He was working in railway stations, and he was cleaning the railways. And he went in the fridge, and he was thinking the door locked in, and he was thinking in his mind he's going to die now. But the next day they did an investigation, electricity was cut off, so the fridge wasn't cold. Just the mind was thinking like that, and he died.
Yeah.
So it's all in the mind, isn't it? Like someone's.
Yeah. What's it called? Placebo, right? A placebo. So they may give you some medicine and say, "Oh, you take this medicine, you'll get well." But it's not medicine at all. It's just nothing. Just a little tablet, and then people get better because they think, "Oh, I've taken the medicine." Yeah, a lot of it's psychological. Power of the mind. Yes. Anybody else? Yes, Hooray.
Thank you. Just going back to the beginning of the class when you were talking about how the pure devotee obviously is not connected to the material body because he's self-realized. So Prabhupada says that the pure devotee has no contact with the material elements whatsoever. But I've always wondered, what does that actually mean? Does it mean that he would never feel physical pain if he was pricked or something, or cut, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, it's an interesting point that Prabhupada did experience pain, and we saw that to some degree. And there was one point where Prabhupada, he had a heart attack, yeah, but did he experience the pain of the heart attack? Yeah, had 2 heart attacks, yeah. So there was one point when they took Prabhupada into the hospital in New York. Prabhupada hated hospitals and he didn't want to be taken there, but they took him, and they gave him some huge injection. I think it was a spinal tap, like this huge needle. And Brahmananda asked Prabhupada afterwards, did it hurt? And Prabhupada said, we are tolerant. So it seems to indicate that there was some, pain, but how do you react to it? How do you deal with it? It's just like suffering, right? Like, what is suffering? Somebody say, I want to be a millionaire, and I failed to be a millionaire. So that's suffering. But it's all dependent upon your consciousness and what you're going to achieve. So if I say I'm sick, like I'm a bit sick at the moment, you could say that's suffering. But why is it suffering? It's like, if I'm thinking I want to serve Krishna, then I can still serve Krishna, I can still give Bhagavatam class, I can still do my japa. It may be a little bit harder, but is that classified as suffering? It just means that you have to put a little bit more effort in. So is it suffering? It may Prabhupada experience the sensation, but is it suffering? He's not trying to be the enjoyer. He's trying to serve Krishna. He agreed to come to this world to give everything to Krishna. So is it suffering? It may be pain, it may be a sensation, but is it suffering? Whereas I said in class before that the smallest thing can happen to somebody and they can become totally depressed over it. They can become suicidal. They can commit suicide because something happened. It's such a minor thing, it's such a tiny thing. Devotees can take on so much because their mentality is not, I want to enjoy and be comfortable and be happy and be in my comfort zone. Their mentality is, Ohitikiya pratihata, I'm going to do anything to serve Krishna no matter what it takes. So Prabhupada definitely felt things with his body, but at the same time we know that Prabhupada understood that he wasn't his body and fully realized that. So I guess just the point I'm bringing up is, what does it mean to suffer? What does it mean to experience pain? Krishna experienced Bhishma Dev shooting him with arrows. Krishna was bleeding as the highest pleasure. There's a story about Saint Francis of Assisi that they were going out preaching door to door, like Haridas Thakur and Nityananda would just knock on the door and ask them to glorify God, to serve God, to remember God. Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koro Krishna, Shiksha. And they would go and people would chant and they would surrender and they would join them. And one of St. Francis's disciples would say, "Are you happy?" And he would say, "No." And they would go somewhere else and people would chant and surrender and say, "Are you happy?" He'd say, "No." And then he went somewhere else and the people shouted at him and pushed him into the mud on the floor. And they said, "Are you happy?" He said, "Yes, because I'm giving something now. I'm investing something. I'm sacrificing something for God, and God will see that I'm serious, that I have an asset that I can show him. I've done something for you." When it's easy, then what have you done? You're just enjoying. But when you're giving, he was actually happy when he went through that suffering. Queen Kunti says, how does it go? I have to remember the verse, but she says, send these miseries again and again. Bhavanam darshanam tat syat. So when we see these miseries, then you come. So I want it. So what does it mean? What does it mean to suffer and to... What does it mean? We don't want it, right? I don't want to get stung by a bee. I don't want to fall over. I don't want to twist my ankle. But if you're serving Krishna and your whole life is a mission to serve Krishna, then what does it mean that there's obstacles? How glorious. Prabhupada says that the obstacles show the character of a devotee in the Bhagavad Gita. If there's no obstacles, then how can you prove that you're a great devotee? Not that we want to, but how do we get... Prabhupada said he wants a certificate from Krishna, what he's done for him at the end of this life. Yes, Prabhu, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just reminded for the story that Jananivas Prabhu, I think the first time he met Prabhupada, at the Calcutta airport, they brought because he brought a garland and sandalwood paste, so he was putting sandalwood paste on Prabhupada's forehead, but he was holding the brass bowl, and he kind of hit Prabhupada's head with it, accidentally, and he was looking at Prabhupada's eyes, and Prabhupada didn't twitch for a second, it didn't, and that he kind of realized, Prabhupada just knows he's not his body, he's just not affected, because any ordinary person, if it happened to me, you kind of, unconsciously, even without you will twitch, your body will react in some way, but he could see that Prabhupada's consciousness was above his body. I was reminded of that.
Yeah.
An interesting example to demonstrate this. Prabhupada demonstrates it in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Similar to the jet lag, right? Prabhupada just walked off the plane, straight into the change of my watch, just new time zone. But at the same time, he would experience something. He would get sick. Prabhupada would get sick. I just heard yesterday, my spiritual master was saying that Prabhupada said he was getting sick because his disciples weren't going to the morning program. So there's some, the guru takes on some of the karma of the disciple when they get initiated. And if the disciple is not following Krishna consciousness properly, then the guru will suffer because of that. So Prabhupada did experience certain things, but at the same time we know that he was totally transcendental to his material body. So it's an interesting topic you could do a dissertation on. Did Prabhupada experience material miseries? How did it work? How does it work with these great sages? Yeah, very difficult to understand the activities of a pure devotee. I guess ultimately it's what Krishna wants to happen. Krishna allows certain things to happen in certain situations. If Prabhupada hadn't gone through various material so-called miseries, then it wouldn't be as inspiring for us as well, right? Prabhupada just chanted Hare Krishna and went back to Godhead. It's what about me? What about me and all my miseries and my sufferings and difficulties? And we wouldn't be able to relate. We can relate to Prabhupada's story because he went through so much. Okay, I think we should finish there. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi.